Welcome to Catching Up to FI, a podcast on mindset, money, and life for late starters of any age on their journey to financial independence. I'm Bill, and I'm a late starter.
I'm Jackie, and I'm also a late starter, and we're your host. We're here to help you on your journey to financial independence, no matter where you're starting.
We're going to talk to experts, other late starters, and explore topics related to our mission.
Join us as we catch up to FI together.
Hello, and welcome back to Catching Up to FI. I'm Bill Yount with Jackie Kamiskowski, and today we're talking about an edge topic that is not given enough attention, and let's let Jackie give you the lead-in.
That's right. If you think pensions are dead, think again. Even though traditional pensions have become the exception and not the rule, still about 20% of U.S. employers offer pensions. So that's not small. And that frozen pension that you thought was worthless or even a partial pension, it actually could be a lot more valuable than you think. So today we're talking pensions. And to help us with that, we've got Andy Panko, one of the brightest minds when it comes to retirement planning and education. Bill, why don't you introduce Andy and tell us a little bit more about him?
Well, he's a well-known hero and leader in the space, but yeah, we'll give him a little intro because Andy is a certified financial planner, financial educator, and the founder of Tenon Financial, an independent flat fee advisory firm that we love. Andy specializes in retirement planning and taxes and is known for breaking down complex financial topics into practical, easy to understand, and even humorous education. He not only shares his vast knowledge to his clients, but also the nearly 80,000 members in his private Facebook community and the general public through his website, YouTube, podcast, and excellent, exhaustive, and knowledgeable monthly newsletter. So Andy, welcome back actually to Catching Up to FI. It's been a long time. We're highly due to have you back for this topic.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be back. I very much appreciate the offer, and this is going to be a wildly exciting topic, so thank you.
Just like taxes, pensions, it's riveting.
It is.
We can make things sexy and fun. Look, we made that 72T sexy and fun, so we're going to do the same thing with this one, because when more, you can get really creative. Now, Andy, I hope you didn't come without jokes. Now, you are like the king of bad dad jokes, so hit us with one.
It is a medical joke. I thought I'd keep this appropriate. What type of doctor is Dr. Pepper?
Oh, God.
Yeah, right.
Is he bubbly or I don't know?
A physician.
Oh, there you go.
Right? See what I did? See what happened there?
I was close, and that's so appropriate. I'm going to have to tell my nurses that at work. Okay.
Now, Andy, I thought I would take the challenge and come up with my own little joke, okay? So you can rate me on a scale of 1 to 10. 9's only, okay? So that's not the joke. So I do have a daughter. Bill, she loves dogs as much as you. She's got 2 golden retrievers, and I am not a big dog fan. So she's like, Mom, why don't you like dogs? And I'm like, it's not that I don't like dogs. They just give me reason for pause.
Ooh. That's a 9. That's a solid 9. Well done. Yeah.
You're in the bad mom joke club. I don't have one, guys. I just cannot remember a joke for the life of me. But I do want to hear from Andy because he opens every show not only with a bad joke, but a goofy smile moment that usually involves his family. And we love hearing about families and making personal finance personal. So Andy, I think you were recently on a vacation, or you always got things going on in your family. What's the most recent goofy smile?
So this one is sort of family involved. This past weekend, we were at a friend's house for their daughter's high school graduation. So their older daughter's the same age as mine, both graduated high school this year. And so we were there, weather was perfect, it was outside, and it was a mix of adults and then also kids, graduating seniors. And I was on fire on the cornhole boards, by the way. Me and my friend, we were playing. And then we took a break to go get something to eat. And then the kids took over. 7 or 8 high school kids were playing. And they were on it for a while. And then finally they sort of stopped. And we asked if we can play. And they said, sure. And we absolutely schooled these kids and destroyed them in cornhole. Now, I don't know why this made me smile, but it did. We were nice about it. We weren't jerks, but weren't rubbing in their face. But they were having a good time thinking they were good at playing cornhole. Then the 2 old guys came in and just completely cleaned up. And that made me smile for some weird moment. Again, I wasn't mean about it or anything, and we all had a good time, but it was fun playing cornhole with an 18-year-old.
Well, what's a good old-fashioned American barbecue party without cornhole? That's almost a prerequisite, so.
In the last 15 or so years, that's become the staple. It used to be horseshoes, right? It was lawn darts for a brief period 40 years ago until people got hurt. Now it's cornhole.
Very popular in Tennessee at a Vols game. You see cornhole going on everywhere when they're tailgating. So before we dive into the topics today, I know that you have a passion for woodworking and you named your firm Tenon Financial. I was a woodworker in the day and I did some totally hand-built tables and things. So I understand the difficulty involved here, and then graduated to some power tools. Although I'm an emergency physician, I'm definitely afraid of losing a digit because that's all I see.
Right.
But tell us about what a tenon is, why you named your firm Tenon Financial, and how that might apply to personal finance.
So a tenon is a form of joinery connecting two pieces of wood together. It's called a mortise and tenon joint, where a tenon is essentially just a square peg and the mortise is the receiving square hole that the tenon goes into. Time tested, very simple, but very strong, secure, stable, etc. Now, I'll lead with the cheesy manufactured story of why I called the firm Tenon Financial, and I'll give you the real answer. So the cheesy manufactured story is like the woodworking joint, mortise, and tenon. Retirement planning doesn't need to be fancy, doesn't need to be complicated. Just get the basics right, do them well, and it is a solid, durable, no frills, gets the job done really well means of doing something, mortise and tenon joint. And you can equate that to retirement planning. Doesn't need to be fancy. You don't need the newest shiny object product. You don't need the shiny object strategy. Just do what works, stick to the basics, and do it well. That's the fake story. The real story is I wanted a domain name that's relatively short and sweet, that's only like 2 words and isn't 50 characters long. So when I'm telling it to someone, oh, my company is something.com and my email is andy@something.com. I didn't want to do like something-FP or something with that, whatever. And I didn't want it to be 50 characters long. And the restriction was trying to find a web domain that's not already taken, that's short, only a couple words, and not this monstrosity of length of characters. And so I went through the list of everything I could think of. I didn't have any ideas in mind yet for a company name other than I wanted the name to be short and sweet and the domain name available. So I went through all the typical financial advisory words, the normal sort of stuffy, boring beacon and lighthouse and compass and blueprint and safety and all that stuff. All these things were taken, something financial or something planning or whatever. And so I had to get creative. I started going through, okay, what are things that I like personally? Cycling, woodworking. It started going through cycling terms and woodworking terms, something financial or whatever financial, dovetail financial, taken. And so finally, hundreds of names in, I realized Tenon Financial was a web domain that had not yet been registered, so I can suck it up for only $20 and buy it, as opposed to something that was already registered and someone's trying to resell, it's going to be, hundreds if not thousands of dollars. So Tenon Financial it was. It's short, it's sweet, it's 2 words, it's easy to explain, it's short enough to type. The only issue in hindsight is some people call it Tenon or they don't know how to pronounce it, but not that big a deal. So, and then I was like, let me have a cheesy backstory in case someone asks. I don't want to just be like, oh, I don't know, it was the shortest name I can find available on the internet. So I came up with that story about Tenon Financial.
That's interesting, and it's meaningful to you and personal, and I think it's easy to remember. It's very easy to remember. My advisor called his firm Cardinal Financial with a K because it was in honor of his mom who had passed away. And I asked him, why did you name your firm that? And we had the same difficulty, Becky and I. Actually, my wife came up with a name when we were coming up with a name for Catching Up to Fi, because I was like, oh, late starter Fi, late starter fire, and that was kind of negative and doomy and gloomy. And then I thought about Catch Up to Fi, but then my wife said, no, this is an action thing. You're taking action and it's movement. So you got to have Catching Up to Fi. And then that kind of stuck. It was like, yeah, once you hit it, it's like finding a name for a dog or finding a name for a child. You go through all these 1,000 things and you come back to the simple thing. So anyway, I just thought it was interesting. And now we've promoted your firm. So nobody on this show is going to forget your firm's name when they need to.
And when they type it, it'll be easy to do. So.
Exactly. All right. Tell us a little bit about your firm. And you evolved out of the traditional financial services and out of the big box traditional financial service complex and went backwards into this as a second career, as a lot of the good guy and girl financial advisors do. So tell us about your focus, your strengths, and the growth of the firm, purpose, meaning, all that stuff.
Yeah, sure. So after 19 years in the traditional big bank, big brokerage, big insurance company world, now I wasn't an advisor. I was doing more corporate, institutional investing, risk management, et cetera. I wasn't working with individuals per se, but in and around investing in a lot of the same principles. After ultimately 19 years in that, just had enough between long commutes to and from my home in New Jersey to New York, long hours. This was pre-COVID, so everything was still in the office. So long hours sitting at a desk. And the work, while I learned a lot and the pay was good, it wasn't fulfilling anymore. The learning curve kind of stopped. The personal satisfaction and enjoyment stopped being there. And so I wanted to get into something more fulfilling and directly work with individuals and hopefully see like the work and the advice I give translate and apply to someone in their personal life, not just helping another big bank or another financial institution make more money, but help an individual. And so I thought, I don't know, this seems like it'd be a great thing to do. I think I'd like it. I think I'd like working with people. And I also wanted a change in lifestyle personally. I didn't want a commute. I didn't want to work at a big place. I didn't want to be shackled to a desk 40, 50, 60 hours a week. I wanted to make my own schedule, et cetera. And so it was a few years of planning to eventually quit the corporate world and start this thing up, which I did in November 2019 from true nothing. There was no existing clients or relationships to bring because I wasn't in this exact business again. And had a very clear vision of what I wanted to do. Work with traditional pre-retirees is what the industry calls them, people 55-ish or older in retirement or close to it, and help them distribute and live off their money. Now, plenty of advisors focus on retirement and want to go after the retiree client, but what a lot of them don't do at all or don't do well is the tax planning around it. Really getting in the weeds with figuring out what's the tax impact of taking money from my IRA versus my Roth versus my brokerage, and how do donations work into this if I have a pension, Social Security, home equity, whatever. Tie it all together into like a cohesive, really hands-on income and tax planning process throughout the months, throughout the years. So that's what's unique about the firm and what we do. A secondary unique thing is, having been in and around the industry so long, I was fundamentally opposed to charging a fee that's based on percent of assets, because I realized asset size alone is a really terribly arbitrary indicator of what goes into providing financial services, the resources involved, the outputs, if you will, the value from it. It's just really random. So why charge on something that's going to fluctuate every quarter and not really be tied to what you're doing for someone? So we charge a flat fee. And I came out with the flat fee right out of the gates. This wasn't something I evolved into. It was through years of planning this firm. I was like, this is the least worst way to charge someone for financial services. None of these models are perfect, but this one is the least flawed, in my opinion, for what I do and who I do it for. So I started the firm by myself, wanted to stay the quintessential solo operation, have 40 to 50 clients and be done and just kind of hang out and serve the clients well, and that's it. The business did much better, much faster than expected. And a lot of people are still reaching out, wanting to work together even after I said, sorry, I'm done. And so after a period of just freely pointing these people to other advisor friends I liked and trusted and had similar models, I thought, okay, maybe I could grow a little bit, try to keep it intentional, try to keep the growth modest. Long story short, it's now me plus 2 other advisors who've since come on, and one's at capacity, one will be at capacity by the end of the year. I'm personally done taking on clients. Wheels are already spinning, likely higher again next year, and then see where this goes. But I'm trying to not let it get too carried away or too big, because I want it to still look and feel small and manageable.
You were saying how fast your firm grew. And did you start in 2020? Because I remember all the free stuff that you were giving away, in terms of you were doing a Wednesday night Facebook Live, giving away free information in your Facebook group, all the education on your website. It sounded like you really took advantage of those COVID years. So where do you think most of that growth came from? Because you're a popular guy.
Oh, well, thank you. You're too kind. It really started right after COVID. So the business technically started November 2019 from true zero, true scratch. And at the time, I was doing what I thought advisors were supposed to do to market. I was doing some local library seminars. I was trying to get quoted in some online publications. I was taking out to lunch local CPAs and estate planning attorneys and stuff. And not much was really working from that. But granted, those are long games anyway. And then March of 2020 happened and COVID came around and just stopped that stuff. I was still able to try to get quoted online and some articles, but the library seminar stopped, the lunches stopped, meeting anyone in person just wasn't an option. So here I am, I'm 4 months into this business. My only clients were 3 family and friends, and that was it. Now what do I do? And so I started a Facebook group in April of 2020 and had nothing but time on my hands because no business really yet. and just poured all my energy into creating this group, which at the time was called Taxes in Retirement, to be a discussion board, a place to share information, a place for me to answer questions to people who ask them about retirement planning and the tax planning around retirement planning. And so I was in other retirement groups already, passively trying to get people to come join and follow my group and get some members in there. The group took off pretty quickly. Within a few months, there was a lot of people in it, a lot of people asking questions. And when I knew the group was onto something, someone asked a question. I remember what it was. Let's just say Roth conversions. I'm making this up. But I wrote back this really long multi-paragraph answer in super detail. And I always asked nothing in return. Like, Jackie, you've been in the group a while. It was never, oh, you want to find the answer to that? Set up a call, let me know, or come. No, it's just you ask, I answer, done. Because I hate being salesy. And so I answered this question, and she replied back something along the lines of like, wow, that's a much better answer than my own advisor gave. And you replied back a week faster than he would have.
Wow, that says a lot. That says a
Yes.
lot. And I was in there nearly from day one, and I was studying for my CFP exam at the time. And the content I was getting from you and your videos and everything was better than the main person that was over my exam review program. Yeah. So you did a lot for me.
One of the things I found in this particular flat fee advisor community, that marketing has taken a shift to where education, free education, is the marketing platform of podcasting, YouTube, newsletter, and you do it all. And you can pick a platform and specialize. But one of the reasons I found my advisor was he had robust education in videos and blogs on his website. Podcasting may not be his strength or something in the future. Or you have a big presence on LinkedIn where a lot of people are answering questions. And again, creating community around this where it becomes a pull for marketing as opposed to a push. And people find you and go, I like how he talks. I like his personality. I like how he's very giving and educational. I'm going to call, because I want to find out more and I may need services like this. So I think that's the natural evolution of granular, organic, unconflicted marketing. So I commend you for the approach. And seems like it was almost accidental because of COVID. It was a happy accident, right?
Yeah, COVID was terrible to say, but best thing that could have happened to my business. The stars aligned, the timing aligned, especially again, working with people 55 plus, they were forced to get comfortable learning Zoom, using Zoom, living life online, transacting important things online, because I had no choice other than to do that. And so it just worked out. There I was, this brand new business, nothing to do. I'd go on Facebook and just start giving away everything in my head to a network of people who were already had to be home, sitting in front of their computers because I had nothing else to do anyway. It worked out really well.
Were you financially independent when you did this, or did you have a long runway? Because it sounds pretty stressful to me to become an entrepreneur and have 3 clients and a family of 2 or 3 kids to feed. What was that emotional runway like?
It was 3 years of serious planning. It was 2016 when I decided I'm doing this. And my wife was on board. We discussed it. We talked about what it would look like and what I was trying to do and what it's going to cost. And so it was 3 years until I finally pulled the trigger and left. I gave myself 3 years for 2 reasons. One was to save up money, to have a big cash cushion to live off of. 2 was just to actually learn more about this, about the technical aspects of planning, about the regulatory aspects, the marketing aspects, the best practices of software and what to do and whatever. The plan was, we saved up enough cash that I can have truly zero income from the business for like 2.5 years roughly. And I'd just be burning through our cash savings, not tapping home equity, not hitting the kids' 529s or anything like that, just living off cash. And I figured from what I learned in listening to podcasts and reading blogs and from other knowledgeable folks in the industry, you'll know about 1.5 years, 2 years in if your advisory business is working. You're not going to be full steam necessarily, but you'll know, okay, I see the path to how this is going to make it. If you're 2 years in, it's like, I got 2 clients and no one's calling, something's horribly off. It's either you or your market or your marketing or whatever. And so I figured, okay, we got enough time, we can just burn through cash. If it doesn't work, the fallback is, you know what? I just go back to doing the same job I was doing, granted probably at a different place, but the jobs were easy enough to get. And I'm back to where I was when I started, right? Other than I would have burnt through some money in the process, but I wasn't concerned about going back and getting another job. That was my fallback. I was hoping I wouldn't need to use it, and thankfully I didn't. But because it was so well thought out, so well planned for, so much cash was saved, it was a relatively low risk thing. And if it failed, I went back to work. So
even though you weren't financially independent, you had enough of a bridge to be able to go after what you wanted to go after, because it's not
Correct.
easy. You've got a family to support and all of that. So I love it.
I want people to understand not only is your business thriving, but you in the flat fee advisor space are thriving. You're a leader. You go to conferences, you talk, you're on level in my mind with people like Kitsis and Christine Benz, but you're very humble and you stay under the radar a little bit more. I really encourage our audience, if they haven't heard of what you're doing and the education you're doing, dive into it. But enough said, because we got to get on to pensions and what we really wanted to talk about. Jackie?
We'll put all of your free, amazing resources in the show notes, so everyone will have access to that. Since you were talking about your clientele, the 55 traditional retiree, I'm curious about how many of your clients do you see a pension being a part of the picture?
Approximately a third.
Oh, wow.
Maybe. Were you expecting more or were you expecting less?
I was expecting less, because the number that I saw was like 20% of employers. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe about 20%, but you're saying a third. That's interesting.
Yeah, maybe I didn't count. I probably should have counted, but somewhere from a quarter to a third. And those that do, most of them are federal or municipal employees, which I'm sure we'll talk about because they still have pensions for the vast majority of federal and municipal employees. The ones that have corporate pensions are usually the ones they had from a job 20 years ago or something that are tiny and they got capped out or whatever, but still it's a pension nonetheless.
And I think a lot of our audience will fall in that place. Towards the end, I will show kind of my pension, but I was part of a private company where the pension got frozen. Can you go ahead and define that for us? Because there's a lot of people out there, like you said, with the older pension that got frozen or it stopped or something midway into the shift to 401k. So when people say frozen pension, what does that really mean?
Yeah, so somewhere roughly 25 years ago, maybe, private employers, so non-federal government and non-state and local government employers, most had pensions, traditional pensions. You know, you work a certain amount of years and your payout you'll get as a pension will be the sum of whatever your average of the last 3 years in some formula. That was rather common. With the advent of defined contribution plans like 401k or 403bs coming in, where more of the onus was shift to the employee paying in towards their retirement, traditional defined benefit pensions, like we're talking about, slowly went away. Those that had them, most of them somewhere around 2005, give or take a handful of years, depends on the company, froze them, meaning, okay, we're not taking this pension away from you because this is what you signed up to do and we're going to play by the rules that we agreed to, but it's not going to grow. We're not going to contribute to it. The formula that we originally said of you'll get your final 3 years average out, whatever, we're not doing that. We're going to snapshot it today, basically, and it's done. Now, maybe between then and when you ultimately retire, even if it's 20, 30 years later, it may still grow by some amount. It'll just be some sort of like interest-based growth, but the real meat and potatoes of the growth stopped or got frozen at some point around 20 years ago.
Andy, I think mine was, there's no new contributions or anything, so it wasn't growing that way, but based on the interest rate that they used or maybe some type of whatever's investments inside of them, mine grew at a minimum of 4%. And I'm not sure how common that is. And it was a maximum of 12%. So nothing new could come in, but whatever was left there, that's how it grew. So it was getting bigger. And is that typically how it happens?
I can't speak on behalf of all of them because they're different. That sounds more generous than typical from the few I've seen that have been frozen. But yeah, it's something like that, correct. The employer's not adding to it. The employee's not adding to it. Whatever it is, but there'll be some amount of growth. And that growth is dependent on how the company chooses to invest it. That sounds high. The fact that you can get 12% growth is high, but...
And I don't think it ever got up there. I think it was only ever 4%. So I'm kind of giving them the side eye. Was it ever 12%? I don't think so. But to your point, these private companies, they could do whatever they want. It's going to clearly be governed by whatever their summary plan description is for the pension and things like that.
And private employer pensions are governed by what's called ERISA, E-R-I-S-A, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act from 1974. Companies couldn't just take the pension away completely. ERISA would be like, no, that's bad. That's anti-employee. So there are rules they need to stick to. And you're right, Jackie, there'll be some plan document that says, but when it comes time to freeze something, I believe there's limitations to like how much they can stop it or cut back due to ERISA.
It's interesting to me because our generation, our late starters, are predominantly Gen X, or some boomers, but the history of pensions was interesting to me when I was looking into this, because prior to World War II, if I understand it correctly, it was like work 9 to 5 for 40 years until you die, and you didn't live beyond 65, and Social Security only had to last for 3 years or so because of longevity. And the heyday of pensions was like in the 60s, 70s, and 80s for the boomers. And then for my generation, I grew up with my dad having a state employee's pension plus a little 401k on the side. And I was aware of that. And maybe I assumed that's the way it was going to be for me because society was just going to take care of me. I didn't have to worry about it. And I got lost in that shuffle between defined benefit and defined contribution, didn't educate myself, didn't really pay attention to what a 401k was, and realized that I was responsible for my own retirement health. And that happened to a lot of our population. Pensions are not really a new phenomenon. They didn't last very long, especially in the corporate side, because they became too expensive because people lived too long, right?
Yeah, I don't knock companies for doing it. People often paint the narrative that these companies are evil for pulling this out from under us. It's not sustainable, or it's so expensive to do. It's such an albatross of a financial burden for the company that they're going to take something else away from you elsewhere because of demographics and people living longer, and because the company shoulders all the responsibility for ensuring they have enough money there, they make the money grow, et cetera, to be able to fulfill these payment promises that they made to pensioners where they can last, again, 30 years, depending on how long someone lives. That's a lot of risk and expense to take on. So I get why they shed them off.
And I'm also thinking about the administrative burden of some of them, because when employees work for 40 years, then there wasn't a lot of turnover. There wasn't a lot of accounts to manage or whatever. But now all of a sudden you got people changing jobs 7 years in their lifetime. And now you've got a much larger number of people and accounts to sort of manage and do whatever. I guess that was a part of it too. So a lot of reasons that we logical people understand why that's happening, but they're not completely gone, right?
Correct, yeah. One interesting statistic, and I have to make this up because I don't remember the number. This was like 20 years ago. Wall Street Journal article was talking about, I think it was Ford, and the cost of Ford's traditional pension. And at the time, again, I'm making this up, but the figure really surprised me. Let's say the average price of a Ford car at the time was $25,000. I don't know. The cost of Ford's employer pension, every car sold, it equated like $1,500 of pension costs for every car sold. Again, I'm making this up, but the figures were large enough. It's like, wow. If a car on average is $25,000 and $1,500 of it right off the top is going just to pay people who are retired, like they're not actively contributing. Wow, I get why that's expensive. Now, they paid their dues, right? They worked there for 40 years, like you said, and that was part of their compensation. So it's not like you're giving freebies away, but that's quite the expense to be saddled with for pensioners, non-active workers.
And also, Andy, not that we're going to get into this piece today, but a lot of pensions also had a component of a health insurance that was a part of it if they retired before 65.
Retiree, yeah. And that's another expense that's going to be longer than expected and more expensive than expected, probably.
Yeah, and as we know now, we've gone to the 401k. The match is their contribution to the quote-unquote pension, and the industry has created target date funds to mimic a pension and set it and forget it like a pension would have been. So we've gone through that before. My son is now a teacher in the Durango school system in Colorado, and he has a state pension, the Colorado Para, and I'm having to dig into this from the prospective side of a pension in evaluating not only the cost, but the true benefit to him as far as retirement and salary, the value. And so it's really important to understand these things, because each plan is different and each plan has a distinctive value within the retirement options that they'll offer a new employee. I know you deal with retirees, but when you're looking at a young person in state, federal, municipal, military arenas that wants to truly evaluate the value of their pension today compared to maybe the old days and as percentage of what their secure retirement income will be, what process would you take them through to evaluate its true value?
That's tough. I mean, you can put numbers to it, but you have to make a lot of assumptions. Like if someone's 23, let's say, and they have a couple different job offers. One is to go be a public teacher where they will get a pension, but their salary is not going to be that high. or one is some private employer where there's no pension, but they're going to make higher salary. If you want to strip away the work and the fulfillment and whatever, just look at the dollars and cents of this. What's the value to the pension or cost of lower salary? That's hard because you got to make projections over 40 years and assumed growth of what money could be or not be.
Or are you going to stay there? How long are you going to stay there? You know?
Yeah, you're probably not going to stay there anyway, right? To get the full vesting or full growth of it. But just to put $1 to it from the other perspective. So someone who's retiring and has a pension, a lot of people think like teachers, for example, or federal employees that might have a pretty sizable pension, but might not have a lot of traditional retirement savings like 401k, or federal employees, it's a thrift savings plan, or TSP is the 401k equivalent, but they have pretty good pensions. I just looked now, if you get a pension of roughly $6,600 a month, starting for someone who's 65, if you want to put that on a lump sum basis, that's roughly $1 million worth of present day asset. That's real money, right? So another way to think about it, would you rather have $1 million in your 401k at 65, or would you rather have a pension paying you $6,600 a month for the rest of your life?
Yeah.
With given current interest rates and living assumptions, like those are roughly comparable figures from that perspective. So there is financial math behind it where you can put a dollar amount on what's the pension worth, but it's hard to do when you're in your early 20s.
And the actuaries go through that. So why don't we back up for just a minute? I do want to recognize that there's 3 or 4 main types of pensions. There are nuances, but we're going to talk about them as a whole because the evaluation is very similar. So you talked about private pensions for private company, right? Mm-hmm. And then we've got state pensions that normally is teachers, I don't know, maybe hospitals or whatever. And then we've got federal. So are there municipalities that will have their own pension plan that's not a part of the state?
There could be. I don't want to say there's not. Generally, at least in me, New Jersey, municipal employees, like if you work for the town, you're part of the state system, the New Jersey TPAF or something, teacher's pension. And no, there's a separate one. New Jersey has multiple buckets. But there could be municipalities like New York, for example. New York City, I think, is its own system that has its own pension separate from the state. So it's possible.
And one thing you have to think about, too, is people could think, for example, oh, I'll just rely on the pension for my retirement and I don't have to save on my own because I do plan on working here and it will just take care of me. But that isn't necessarily the case. And the value of a pension compared back in 1960 to now, what percentage of the income they may replace for you later in life, and is it inflation adjusted, may not be as robust as you think. And calculating your global savings rate is trickier with a pension that will get you to 5, for example, in 10 or 20 or 30 years. I think that's much harder in a way. And you're going to accumulate pensions potentially throughout life. And we're going to have to talk about how do you manage them so you don't accumulate 10 pensions in your life that are all separate and you have to find them. So there's sort of strategy to this because people job hop to 7 to 12 jobs and don't stay somewhere for 40 years. So yes, pensions are a part of your retirement plan, certainly not the entire part. And you have to learn how to manage them in a global accumulation portfolio fashion, right?
Yeah. And there's credit risk that the entity behind the payments is going to be there to pay you in full and on time the rest of your life. So with private employers, again, non-federal and non-state and local employers, a risk is there. There's federal backstops. There's the PBGC, Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation. That is a federal backstop that every company who issues a pension has to pay into it. It's basically like insurance premiums, if you will, such that if the company goes under, because if you have a pension from, I'm just making this up, IBM, I'm not picking on them, it's just the first one that came to mind. If IBM goes out of business, in theory, the pension stops because it's their obligation to you. You have credit risk to IBM. Realizing, whoa, that's dangerous potentially. The government's like, we need a backstop. In case IBM in this case goes bust, we can't have all these pensioners just their pensions disappearing and then being bust in retirement. So PBGC steps in and helps backstop that. They in effect take over pension obligations from IBM, again in this case, I'm not picking on them, and will continue to pay the pensioners. However, they don't guarantee 100 cents on the dollar. I don't know the exact math behind it, but all else equal, the larger your pension was, or like the higher earner that you were at the company, the lower percentage of your pension they'll ultimately make good for. Now, whether that's 70 cents on the dollar or 50, I don't know, but it's not necessarily 100. So you have that potential risk to be concerned about. Federally, you're a federal employer, in theory, same thing holds. Your pension's only as good as the federal government's willingness and ability to pay you. Now, I don't see the federal government ever stiffing people on pensions. If the government ever truly goes bust, we have much bigger problems. What concerns me is the state and local pensions. So like if you have a New Jersey state pension, New Jersey and Illinois, as of a year or two ago, they were the worst funded pension systems of all the states, meaning it is quite possible they may run out of money at some point. Now they can raise taxes. They have the ability to raise taxes for revenue, but can only squeeze so much juice from that stone, right? You raise taxes too much on people, there'll be an exodus of people leaving the state. There's no federal backstop for state and local pensions like a state of New Jersey pension, right? And it's not the federal government where they can just simply print money if they want to pay pensions. So states are in a unique thing. So I'm not saying don't let that stop you from becoming a teacher in New Jersey or Illinois, but the risk is very real in certain states like New Jersey and Illinois.
Yeah, pensions are functionally insurance products, right? And you don't control how they're invested, how aggressive they are, and you have no idea under the hood what's going on with regards to funding and growth and investment and keeping up with inflation. You just trust, but you can't really verify at some level. So yeah, and then in the private world, there is a significant credit risk because thankfully those organizations are there as reinsurance to the insurance of a pension, which in some ways functions like an annuity, which we can talk about too, because that's one of the ways you can distribute a pension. But prospectively, it really behooves you to understand what you're getting into from regards to a diversified retirement plan and accumulation and distribution, and not just trust that it's going to take care of you like I did, that the world will just take care of you. We own our own retirement, whether it's a pension or not. And that's really just a component of it. Jackie, let's dig into more of the details of this. Where do you want to go with this pension discussion?
Yeah, so let's do this. I want to make sure, I'm curious, Andy, about for your clients, when you mentioned that some of them have a really old pension, if it's a private pension, how do they normally view those? Are they like, yay, I got this pension? Or are they like, I want to roll it over immediately. I don't want to mess with something so old. Like, how do you have that conversation with them?
Every client has their own idea coming in the door or preference, what they think they want to do with it, but then usually defer to the advisor because that's what you're hiring them for, to help think through as objectively as possible. Do you actually want or need guaranteed income in your life, or guaranteed's kind of in quotes? Again, it's only as good as the claims paying ability of the company issuing it or whatever backstop there may be to it. If they do need it, is this the most effective way to get it by taking this monthly income from this company pension? Or is it better to cash it out, take a lump sum, go buy a commercial annuity from an insurance company, because maybe you can get a higher payout from that than you can by taking your traditional pension from your employer? Or some people, they're good enough, or they don't want the fixed income regardless and say, I just want to lump sum it, go take the money and reinvest it as I please. I've only had a few people, one comes to mind, maybe two, where like adamantly said, I don't trust my company. I don't care about the backstop. Like, I want the money out, and took the lump sum, rolled it over to an IRA. They didn't want to buy an annuity with it. They just wanted it invested. So we did. Right. Others, we have this discussion and it's partly qualitative. Like, how risk averse are you? Will you sleep better seeing this recurring paycheck come in every month from your former employer as long as you live? It may not be big, but still it's something. And some people really like and value and appreciate that. And it means much more to that person to get that than someone else, because the other person may not care about the peace of mind sake of seeing a paycheck come in. They'd rather have the full control themselves of taking the lump sum, rolling it to an IRA and investing it there. So it's interesting. Different clients have different perspectives. Some are more open and willing to what we have to say. Others, I don't want to say take convincing, but they're a little more already decided what they want to do with the money. So it makes for some fun conversations.
I feel like a lot of people actually do that fixed income part. Bill, you were almost mentioning that you don't know what it's invested in and things like that, like it was a bad thing. And I think most people, they actually like the fact that it's a fixed amount every single month and it looks like a paycheck. Do most of your clients seem to like that fixed amount versus like trying to figure out withdrawal strategies and things like that? Not that it has to be all or one.
Honestly, who wouldn't, right? If you were, everything else aside, would you rather have a lot of guaranteed income every month or none or something in between? Like, we'd all want as much as we can get. Who wouldn't, obviously? The question is, what's the cost of that, right? And while you're working, I guess, Bill, this goes back to your question, what's the cost of working in what's potentially a lower wage job throughout 30, 40 years for the eventual benefit of this guaranteed income from the state of Colorado in this case? Or for those who do retire and don't have any traditional pension, You can get a traditional pension-like product from buying a commercial annuity from an insurance company, but at what cost? Like the quote I just gave, I just looked this up on an annuity quote website before this call. $1 million of lump sum, if you will, $1 million annuity purchase today for a 65-year-old will get you roughly $6,600 a month for the rest of your life as long as you live. No inflation adjustment, just $6,600. That's expensive. Like, people would love getting $6,600 a month of guaranteed income. But when you say it's going to take $1 million to get it, that's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people. So yes, everyone loves the idea of guaranteed income, endless cup of coffee. No matter, I'm going to spend it this month, so what? It's going to show up again next month. I live till I'm 120, it's going to keep showing up. But at what cost does it take to get that?
Yeah, the advantages, and we as far as that distribution of it, that's longevity insurance, a non-inflationary adjusted Social Security, if you will. With the earlier you take it, the more risk of losing purchasing power over time. One of the psychological benefits of it is you're more likely to spend it. You know, you're more likely to live potentially a more robust retirement because people, where they're responsible for their own distributions, you know, may tend to say, oh, no, I don't want to end up under a bridge eating cat food, and I'm going to keep a very low safe withdrawal rate, and you're not guaranteed to spend it. And a lot of advisors like yourselves have to say, yeah, you're going to be okay if you spend this much. And they're trying to encourage them, cajole them, bully them into spending more against their own psychological fears. So yes, the mental accounting psychological security of a pension or an annuity can help people spend more. So there are true advantages mathematically as well as emotionally. As far as the exit strategy, you did a great job talking about lump sum versus sort of annuitization. And you talked about cashing out. We got to be careful about cashing it out because there's penalties involved with that per se. And you have to roll it over into a similar product, which is typically a pre-tax product like a 401k or an IRA, or in the case an annuity. It has to be directly rolled over as opposed to cashed out. Otherwise, you're losing 10% off the bat, right?
Yeah, bad choice of words, yeah. Right.
That's the biggest question that people ask, lump sum versus monthly payments. Now, so I want to be clear, when we use the word annuity, we're not talking about going out and buying annuity or anything. It's just the pension itself, monthly payments are turned on, and they do call that annuitizing it. I have one little technical question, Andy. When you have a state pension, are there states that have their pension plan in lieu of Social Security, meaning that they don't pay into Social Security, or do they typically get both?
No, it depends on the state. I don't know the whole list off the top of my head. I had a client who was a retired police officer in California, worked there his whole career, retired as soon as he could. I don't remember what it was, early 50s. That system, the California public employee system, does not pay into Social Security. So he didn't have Social Security tax deducted from his paychecks while he's working, yay. But also, he had no Social Security benefit. And so they kind of make up for that by there's a larger pension benefit. All else equal, I think states not Social Security typically pay larger pensions. Anyway, his pension, when he retired, $14,000 a month.
Wow.
Right, exactly.
And that's a lot, yeah.
Now, maybe that's because California might be a little too generous with the pension, or partly because he wasn't in Social Security. But like, man, pensions could be really something.
Yeah, it's like he don't stink in Social Security. He's got $14,000 a month.
New York, for example, my mother-in-law was part of the school system. She was in Social Security and gets a pension from New York State.
Is it $14,000 combined?
It is nowhere near $14,000, no, but yeah, it's something.
That's generous. So who knows if that will be around much longer when they're paying out those generous benefits. But to your point, if they don't participate in Social Security, typically the state retirement is enough to offset the fact that they won't get any Social Security in theory anyway. So so this whole lump sum versus monthly payments, why don't we start with lump sum? And I know one good thing about one means that it's a con in the other, but take us through some of the benefits if you decide you want to take a lump sum, or maybe things that might lean you in that direction.
Yeah. So just to clarify, Bill brought up a great point. I think I used the word cash out before. Do not cash out. That is a poor choice of words on my part. If you do have the ability to get a traditional monthly fixed payment pension, you'll also have the ability, almost always, if not always, to take a quote unquote lump sum. That just means, hey, I'm going to forego the ability or the right to get monthly payments and instead just give to me a single amount lump sum now that I'm going to do something else with. if you actually cash it out, you truly have them pay that to you, like that's one big fat taxable event. And if you have $1 million lump sum, that's a lot of taxable income that year. So typically you roll it over, you take it from the pre-tax world of the pension and you roll it into another pre-tax vehicle, like a traditional IRA, like a 401k. That's not a taxable transfer in the process. And then once it's in the IRA 401k, you pay tax on it whenever you take it out, like any other money in any other IRA or 401k. That's a lump sum, and that's what I'm referring to with this rollover. So now you have the choice. You're about to retire, or you're already retired, and you can start your payments soon if you want to. Do you take the payments, or do you take the lump sum? So like you said, Jackie, the pros of one are just the cons of another, and vice versa. But I'm going to view it from the perspective of taking the lump sum. The main pro is really more flexibility. If you take the monthly payments, it is what it is. You're going to get whatever, $3,000 a month for forever, no more, no less. You take the lump sum, you can put it into your IRA. You can do more with it. You can take out 20 grand this year, nothing the next year, 50 grand the next year, et cetera. You can invest it how you want to invest it. Maybe it grows a lot, maybe it doesn't, but point is more flexibility. You're likely, not guaranteed, no guarantees, but you're likely, if invested well, that's likely to end up being financially better for you than taking those monthly payments. Now, a lot of stuff goes into that, obviously, like assuming the returns that you get, assuming how long you live, et cetera. But a well-invested portfolio should reasonably be expected from a dollars and cents perspective to produce more money for you over your lifetime than the payments. Now, like Bill said, you might not spend it, right? A lot of people underspend and not overspend in retirement. Getting a pension is almost like permission to spend. Having $1 million in a 401k, you might be reluctant to take money out of it because you don't want to touch your nest egg type thing. And these all sort of tie together. The other pros are like you can maybe leave a larger legacy by taking the lump sum, typically with a pension, other than if you have a spouse where you die, your spouse then continues on getting payments. Generally, they stop after that. Now, Jackie, I believe your daughter's able to get your pension if you pass?
That was one of my options. It was one of those overly generous pensions where my beneficiary, which is the joint and survivor, the second surviving person is the beneficiary. So when I was looking at that, I did think it had to be spouses only. Again, this is a private pension, meaning that they could set this up however they want, as long as it's within the confines of the, IRS rules. But anyway, I could name anyone as the beneficiary. All I had to do was put in their date of birth. So it gave me the 2 radio buttons, spouse or non-spouse. So I chose non-spouse because I'm not married. And I put in my daughter's birthday. And I'm like, okay, so that means I can get my pension payment every month till the day I die. And once I die, my daughter can get this pension payment for the rest of her life until she dies. Now, my daughter is 20s. She just turned 30, literally. Yeah. So she's very young. So that was fascinating. I did not go with that option, Andy, but I thought it was fascinating that it was even available. So the point to even that as a reference is to say, make sure you're looking at your documents because these companies could have all kinds of little provisions like this. Even though the general rule is joint and survivor is spouses, it doesn't necessarily have to be. So you have to look at the rules of your plan.
Yeah, and with regards to that, let's talk about that because your plan document is critical. You could potentially have a hybrid solution with some, I imagine, where you roll part of a pension, say half of it, and take the other half as distributions. Yeah. And then this joint life survivor, people need to understand that when you choose these things, you're locked in pretty much, and there's no going back. You will get potentially, wouldn't you, Andy, a higher payment as a single life without survivor, i.e. the cost of it's less in a way. And with joint life survivor, when you die, they may only get 50% of your payment. It's almost like a widow tax trap.
Yeah, great point. We should discuss that now, the different payment options. Now, different plans may use slightly different terms, but the functions are the same. There'll always be an option where it's called life only or single life, meaning you, the person who worked there and has since retired or is since eligible for the pension, you get payments as long as you live. Once you die, payments stop, period. There's no like cash lump sum that gets paid to heirs. There's no continuation of payments for anyone. It lasts as long as you do, period. That'll be the highest dollar amount of payment. Next, there'll be, typically it's married. Again, Jackie's plan was overly generous. I haven't seen that much, if ever. But normally it's if you have a spouse, you can elect an option where it's joint life, where if you die, the payment can live on for your spouse. Now, you'll get paid less under that because chances are between 2 people, someone lives longer than just one person does. And so actuarially, the company has to pay less for that because they're expecting to have to pay it out for longer. Even within that, though, you can have, depends on the plan, does the spouse receive 100% of what you're getting when you die? Does the spouse get 75, 50, 25? Different plans have different options. Federal plan, for example, the max spousal survivor benefit is 50%. Spouse will get 50, no more. What else? I mean, those are the big ones.
And for mine, Andy, it had 50, 75, and 100%.
And the 100% means the lowest payment, right? And then the 75 means slightly larger, and 50 means even slightly larger.
Correct. And even though I thought it was a pretty generous thing, if you think about it, Andy, they made me put in her birthday. So the actuaries have already done the math and they've already gotten to it. They've already priced it in. So I'm like, okay, maybe it's not as generous as I thought, because if the daughter was 25 versus 55, that could be, they've already done the math. The actuaries, they do a better job of that than me, so they've already counted the beans. So
I can see where you could potentially get burned taking joint survivor, because say your spouse, you're the one with the pension, your spouse is older than you, potentially significantly, and then they die first. Would that also reduce your payment as the surviving spouse, where you get penalized because you're the one that accrued the pension, but your payment goes down too?
If you take the survivor option, yeah. Typically, yes. Now, some plans may actuarially account for that. And because, let's just assume your spouse is 20 years older, in theory, it's possible the plan actuary would be like, yeah, that person's almost certainly dying soon. So maybe they wouldn't knock your payment down if you were to take a survivor option, because realistically, like, your spouse is going to die before you. But that is definitely a risk. And that is something we take into the analysis with people. Are you married? What's it look like if you were to die? What are the finances going to be for your spouse? And vice versa. What if your spouse dies first? How much do you lose in Social Security? How much do you lose in pensions, et cetera? How much do expenses change when one of you goes? If the spouse is older, that definitely impacts the analysis, right? If the worker is 60 and the spouse is 75, we're likely not taking the spousal option because chances are the older spouse is going to die first. Then vice versa, right? If the worker's 75 and the spouse is 60, like, we're probably definitely taking a spousal survivor option.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing to me too is, do they tell you the planned perpetual growth rate of their pension fund? So say you can calculate, okay, if I do this and I go 100% stocks with a lump sum, I'm going to have, an 8 to 9% real growth rate. But what's the real growth rate of their pension fund? And then you lose out, because if you take your pension early and you're at 50 and it has to last you 30 or 40 years, your purchasing power really diminishes over time, because I don't know that there's many pensions that have an inflation adjustment, unless I guess you can choose that for a lower payment. It's pretty complicated.
Yeah, that. And that was one of my other points around a potential pro of taking the lump sum, is it could potentially keep up better with inflation. Vast majority of private employer pensions, there's not an inflation adjustment. And you retire, you get $4,000 a month, like, it'll still be $4,000 a month when you're 90. And roughly, depending on inflation, every 30-ish years, if not sooner, depending on how high inflation is, purchasing price gets cut in half. So $4,000 a month when you're 60 may be pretty good, but $4,000 a month when you're 90, it's going to be the equivalent of buying like $2,000, if that, worth of stuff. So with a well-invested portfolio, again, assuming markets don't completely tank and stay there forever, you can likely keep up better with inflation, financially speaking, with taking the lump sum and investing it as opposed to the pension. But there's no guarantee. Like, there's no guarantee with the taking the lump sum option.
So, Andy, I guess there's a few different type of risk that may fall into a pro or con of the lump sum. So you've got investment risk, you've got premature death that Bill mentioned, and then you have the employer sustainability. So those risks exist, and will come into how you're evaluating this on whether it makes sense to do the lump sum versus the monthly payments.
Exactly. And even sort of secondary considerations, less pure math stuff, is peace of mind value, like Bill mentioned. Having a guaranteed recurring paycheck come in that's never going to stop, barring default of the payer, that's permission to spend. And a lot of people like that. A lot of people arguably need that to actually spend their money. So there's that, the peace of mind value, if you will. When you get older too, just to go to say, like, it's on autopilot, right? You may want to manage your portfolio now at 65 when you're sharp and with it and enjoy it. When you're 90, you really want to be messing around, taking monthly distributions, figuring out what to sell, figuring out tax withholdings. The pension puts that on autopilot for you.
Yeah, one other little nuance, Andy, and I don't know if this is just with, no, I think it would be with all pensions, really. But so I retired early. I retired at 49. I actually turned my pension on at 55. That was the earliest I could turn it on. Now, one of the benefits that I got from it, I guess it was fall in the pros, by turning on the monthly payments, was that I didn't have to pay the 10% early withdrawal penalty. But
Yes.
but if I would have rolled it over to an IRA and took it out from there, I would have had to pay the 10% early withdrawal penalty.
Not necessarily, but it would have been a little more involved. So yes, you're right. With any pre-tax money, like a pension, like an IRA, like a 401k, generally speaking, if you take it out before 59 and a half, there'll be tax on whatever's taxable, but also a 10% early withdrawal penalty. There's a few exceptions to the 10% early withdrawal penalty, one of which is series of substantially equal periodic payments, or SEPP.
Yeah, I set that up too. The 72T, yeah, I did that too. So.
Yeah, 72T. Yeah, exactly. The meatball right there. So, which basically says in a nutshell, if you take your pre-tax money out, not in random distributions, but in set, recurring, like ongoing, substantially equal periodic payments, that waives a 10% penalty if those payments last at least 5 years or until you turn 59 and a half, whatever comes first. Now, to pension, it's easy. Whether you start your pension at 40, 50, 55, it's going to be the same payment every month, and they're going to last until you die, right? So it meets those conditions. If you were to have taken a lump sum, rolled to an IRA, you could have recreated a SEP, recurring distributions from your IRA, to get around the penalty, but it would have been more work and more process for you to have to worry about.
Right. And more risk, because the risk of, if there's any kind of modification or anything that you did wrong, the penalty is pretty steep for the 72T.
Yes, yeah.
So it took me a minute to do that. But I could tell you, Andy, because my pension was so small, and again, I'll show it at the end, I think it was like around $68,000, the cash value. So not that much. It got frozen. So I was this close to not cashing it out, but rolling it over to an IRA for all the pros that you're mentioning for lump sum. And after I retired and left my job, I finally cleaned up the cobwebs out of my head, and I reevaluated it. And I started looking at all these different options. That's when I found out the provision about my daughter can be the beneficiary, and the fact that if I turned on payments at 55, I wouldn't pay the 10% penalty. And oddly enough, I did have the option of an increase each year, a cost of living adjustment for my company. Okay. That was not flat, but it was 2% each year, but it doesn't start until 65. I did choose that, but it was nice that I had that provision. So I'm like, okay, I got it available, I'll take it.
Yeah, the important thing here, I think, just to reiterate for our audience, is that taking your distributions is plan dependent. You've got to read the plan and see what your options are. And then in the end, you may need to use an advisor to run the math so that you know what is my best lifetime income mathematically and what kind of risk, psychological security would I need. We shouldn't rush to decisions on these. And there are ways to optimize them from a tax standpoint, from an income standpoint, from a psychological security standpoint. One thing I want to know is, what's in the company's best interest, and do they try and cheat you on lump sum versus monthly distribution?
That's so negative. Do they try to cheat you?
No, it's mathematically defined within the plan how they're allowed to value the lump sum. For example, in lieu of taking payments, here's a lump sum. It is interest rate dependent. So I had an example where someone was retiring, had a rather large traditional monthly pension. This was 2021. And when you have a traditional monthly pension and you want to back into what the lump sum, or find out what the lump sum is going to be, it's dependent on the market level of interest rates. Not to get too in the weeds, but this follows basic financial math and bond math. If interest rates go up, prices or present values go down, and vice versa. This particular pension plan revalues its lump sum once every year on a certain date. And in 2022, interest rates shot up. And so we knew the date the lump sum was going to be recalibrated. We knew interest rates had gone up a lot. And so had she taken the lump sum in 2022 versus got together quickly, took it in 2021, she was going to lose, I want to say, like $400,000 of lump sum value.
No.
Simply because interest rates went up. So Bill, the point is, that's not the plan being nefarious. It's just that's calculated, defined math in their plan document of how all this stuff works. And so this was like a second order consideration. She knew a lot about this stuff and knew that this could be a potential angle to look into before she even reached out to me and started working together. But there's a lot of things in analysis, to your point, Bill. Read the documents. You have to understand how this fits in your plan. I have to preface this by saying, and I say this in various ways, all of this stuff is an educated guess. Yes, we can put math and assumptions to it to come up with what do we think is financially better, lump sum or in payments. But all this analysis requires, tell me when you're going to die. Tell me what the stock and bond markets are going to do every year for the next 30 years. Tell me what inflation is going to be. Tell me what your life circumstances are going to be if you're married and have a spouse. Tell me your general level of spending. Tell me what your comfort level is today versus 10 years versus 20 years for managing investments versus just getting paychecks coming in. You tell me with certainty all those things, I will tell you precisely what the right answer is. We're just making guesses on these things, right? So there's a huge element of educated guess. Know the angles, know the pros and cons, make the decision that feels best for you. There needs to be math belying this, but this isn't purely just a math formula. There's a lot of what ifs and guessing and subjectivity to this.
I just learned something here.
Yeah, some of that math, the actuaries of the plan have already done that for you. And I may have mentioned this to you, Andy, but my plan, it did some analysis for me. It was called a relative value analysis, where when it showed me all of my options, it had a little thing that said, this is 100% of your single life annuity, which is the best payment you can get. And I'm like, wow, they did that for me. I guess I could have done the math, but I'm hoping that with AI and better technology, that there could be a little bit more help. And I guess I don't know if Bill was about to ask this question, but I was to ask, do you think AI could help with looking at the pros and cons, people throwing in maybe their numbers, and having AI doing some analysis for them to help them decide? Is that a helpful thing to do for people?
Yeah, it definitely can be. AI is amazing. I'm far from leading edge, heavy adopter of it, but what little I've seen myself and what other advisors have shared with me, it can do some amazing analysis, create amazing, clean to read, pretty output, all in the course of seconds. So no doubt this could be a tool. AI is still relatively early. You still need like a sniff test in some, especially when it's something really complicated and multifaceted. Right. I've found AI has given incorrect answers on like tax legislation interpretations and rules and stuff. But for something like this, it is relatively straightforward math, albeit based on a lot of assumptions. Assuming the assumptions are right, the results AI gives should be pretty good, generally speaking.
You know, it's interesting that I had not heard this. The value of a pension, whether it be the payment or the lump sum, fluctuates with market and especially bond conditions, and it is valued like a bond based on interest rates. And the fact that interest rates were skyrocketing really limits the value of your pension, and you've got to pay attention to these circumstances before you decide what you're going to take. And the other thing that I want you to tell our audience is there are online calculators and annuitization calculators for helping you figure out, is it better to roll it into an annuity from a cost-effective standpoint? Is it better to take the lump sum? Is it better to roll it into an IRA? And as far as the annuity piece goes, isn't there a website that really makes this simple so that you can do an apples-to-apples comparison between taking your lump sum payment versus annuitizing it privately with an insurance company?
Yes, there's a few out there. One I use, and I'm not affiliated with them. I just like them because they let you run free quotes without having to put in your name or any contact information, so they don't reach out to you. It is immediateannuities.com, where you put in, okay, I want to put in X amount of dollars to buy this annuity, put in whatever you want, $100,000, $1 million. You say how old you are, you say what state you live in, you say when do you want the payments to start, next month or 5 years from now. And if you're married, you can put in the age and gender of your spouse, and it'll spit out your options. It'll say, okay, you put in, and this is how I did this analysis before. I put in $1 million initial purchase for a 65-year-old single male. How much annuity income could that get? And the quote was roughly $6,600 a month. So that's how I came up with that. So to your point, Bill, I'll make up an example. Let's assume you have a traditional pension where they'll pay you $6,000 a month for the rest of your life, and you're a 65-year-old single male. If you were to take the lump sum, your pension will tell you this. It'll say, okay, the lump sum is $1 million even. So now with that knowledge, you can go to a place like immediateannuities.com and say, oh, what could I get if I took $1 million lump sum use it to buy a commercial annuity, what would that pay me? In this example I ran earlier, $1 million initial purchase would pay a 65-year-old male roughly $6,600 a month. So about $600 a month more than what your company's pension would be. So in this very made up example, if you knew you wanted the guaranteed monthly income, then it would arguably be in your interest to take the lump sum, not the pension, not the monthly payments, buy a commercial annuity because you'll get higher payments. Now, the analysis is exactly the same because there are state guarantee limits. I wouldn't put $1 million into one single annuity with one insurer, because if that insurer goes bust, you can lose a lot of money. Most states only cover up to like 250 grand roughly of exposure or purchase to any given insurance company. So in this example, you'd want to parse out your annuities and buy like 4 annuities from different carriers, which kind of complicates things because now you got 4 payments coming in. But point is, like, stripping all that aside, looking just at the numbers, it could make interest, or it could be more in your interest to take the lump sum, buy a commercial annuity, because you might end up better off than taking the pension in the first place.
So, Andy, would there be costs associated with going out on your own and buying an annuity? Because whenever you annuitize a pension, that's free. You don't pay anything. But if somebody's going out to buy, let's say, 4 different annuities or whatever to try to mimic this, because it's a little bit more, are those free, or are they paying any kind of fees or costs associated with those?
So nothing's free, ever. There's not necessarily outright costs. Let's use the simplest of example. The most plain vanilla annuity you can buy is called the SPIA, S-P-I-A, Single Premium Immediate Annuity. You take some lump sum of money, you give it irrevocably to an insurance company. You don't get it back, ever. But in return, they guarantee to pay you, per their claims paying ability, to pay you whatever, $6,000 a month for the rest of your life, period. And there's no fee. Like, the economics of how the insurance company makes money is baked into that. So that's why I say it's not free. There's some opportunity cost of nothing else, but there's no outright line item of fee.
Okay, so is it like an expense ratio within a mutual fund or something where it's all built in together?
It's built in, but yeah, unlike an expense ratio where they tell you what it is with an expense ratio, with an annuity, you just don't know. You know you're getting paid $6,000 a month for life. Behind the scenes, the insurance company's investing your money and hopefully making $6,100 a month, let's say. But they're only paying you $6,000. So the insurance company keeps that spread, keeps that difference. But you have no idea what they're actually making. You just know what you're getting for what you paid into it.
And I played around a little bit with that calculator, and I put in my numbers and everything. The one thing I noticed, it asked me for my gender. When you are turning on payments, okay, so when it's a pension through your employer, they don't take your gender into consideration. Is that right?
Generally not. If I don't want to say never, but I mean, maybe behind the scenes, they obviously know your gender. So maybe they account for that. But otherwise, when you start payments, they don't ask you at the time. They just tell you what your payment is. With insurance companies, they do ask because, statistically speaking, women live longer than men, so they'll get paid less in monthly payments, all else equal, because they're anticipated to last for longer, those payments.
So maybe that didn't work to my advantage, but it also asked me for my state, the state that I lived in.
Yeah.
I guess there's some kind of actuarial stuff based on location. And so when I turned on my company pension, it was $510 a month with all the fee, and that included a 2% adjustment. Okay. And it include a 20-year, maybe you can define this for us, but what is it called? It's called a...
Period certain?
Yeah, period certain plus...
Man, your pension's amazing, Jackie. Wow, yeah.
Yeah, it was good. So I wish I had more money in it. So when I want that you mentioned immediate annuities, and I'll put that in the show notes, I put in... It didn't have the option to put in an increase, so it was no increase. And I think it did have a period certain option, so I tried to mimic that.
Before you guys go any further, I don't know what period certain is.
Got it, yeah. So period certain means regardless how long you live, even if you die prematurely, these payments will last for a total of some fixed period, let's say 20 years. So example would be, you're a 60-year-old retiree, you buy an annuity or you get a pension with a 20-year period certain, you die 5 years in at 70 years old or whatever I said. So point is 5 years into this pension. If you opted for the period certain payments, you'll get 15 more years of payments paying out to whomever you name as a beneficiary. It doesn't need to be a spouse, could be a child, could be anybody. But the point is the payer will pay a total of minimum 20 years worth of payments. If you live longer than 20 years, then it doesn't matter. You'll keep getting payments for the rest of your life. But if you die within 20 years, payments will continue on for the remainder of those 20 years.
Yeah, so there's a lot of jargon in these pension plans. Most people would have the ability to go online and they can run what their pension projections. Now, if you're really young, you're 25 or 30 and you just started, there's probably not going to be enough, or it's not going to be as accurate. I was really close, right? I was doing it 2 and 1 year before I was considering turning it on and seeing the difference and everything. So my pension, when I turned it on, it was $510 a month with all those bells and whistles that we just mentioned. When I did it through immediate annuity, of course, it did ask for my gender, so perhaps that has something to do with it. It was $395 a month. So significantly lower.
Big difference, yeah. Generally speaking, company pensions pay out more for a given lump sum amount than commercial annuities do. This was definitely the case pre-2022 when interest rates were really low. Company pensions, almost without a doubt, would always be the better option, financial dollars and cents wise, than commercial annuities. When interest rates rose in 2022, the playing field leveled some. Still, though, generally speaking, in my experience, company pensions have higher payouts than commercial annuities, but it's not always the case. So it's worth at least looking at a place like immediate annuities, just do the comparison. In your case, Jackie, not even close. So you made the right decision there.
And to Bill's point, as far as the terminology and the jargon, when I had my list of options, it did explain that, or I could click the little I. Yeah. I thought it was very friendly, but again, AI could do a very good job of making sure you understand it, because how can you make a good decision if there's things in there or verbiage and terms that you don't understand? Once I understand, because I didn't know what it was either, Bill, but once I understand what it was and I actually clicked the I and saw it, I'm like, oh, that's what I want, because I know my biggest fear, Andy, I don't know how your clients feel, but my biggest fear with doing the pension is that the day after I turn it on, I die and my money's gone, right? This period certain solves that problem to say, even if I do die, and I chose the 20-year, even if I do die, my beneficiary would get the remaining payments that's a part of that 20-year certain. Right. But if I stay living, I continue to get that monthly amount for the rest of my life. So you need to see both parts, the period certain plus life, and that's what mine is.
Yeah. Now, another comment about the annuities, just to further complicate things. The example I gave was the most vanilla, like I said, single premium immediate annuity, where you irrevocably hand over the lump sum. You don't get that anymore. You just get the monthly payments.
Right.
Rightfully, the vast majority of people aren't comfortable with that, like for the reasons you mentioned, Jackie, right? What if I die tomorrow? Majority of annuities, I think it's 90+% of annuities now, don't make you actually annuitize and irrevocably hand it over. Instead, technically, you still own the money. You just buy this guaranteed right to take out a certain amount of your money every month for the rest of your life. It's called a guaranteed withdrawal rider. That does have a fee with it usually. So trying to come back to your question of are there fees with annuities, it depends. There's a lot of different flavors and styles of annuities that look and feel and do different things. So maybe not.
Because, when people see that term annuity, it's not exactly the most positive thing in people's mind.
No,
well, annuities are there to solve a specific problem and have to be evaluated in the context, just like a pension, of the entire financial life and portfolio of the client or investor. And my worry is people will look at the pension in isolation and not in the context of a global financial portfolio perspective, because there's a lot of interplay and there's a lot of sliders here where you change one thing and then you get an unintended consequence somewhere else. And so this is a point in somebody's life, which is a transition point, as I call it, a pivot point. And I honestly, DIY is great and certainly possible, but with the complexities involved in all of these interactive decisions, and you're mentioning pension and annuities and all these decisions that will interact, this is where I would tell even the best DIYer to talk to an advisor that is able to see all the blind spots. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and I'm not making this a pitch. I'll be the first one to say not everybody needs an advisor, nor should everyone pay for an advisor, especially like ongoing. Where I do think there's a lot of value to be had, like you started to reference, Bill, you're approaching retirement, just trying to take stock of what you have. You can't look at any one of these things in isolation. I'm glad you brought that up. This isn't simply a when am I going to die break even analysis. Do you take this or you take that? Sure, maybe that's one small part of the analysis, but you have to look at the context of the rest of your bigger picture. What are your expenses going to be? How many are necessary versus discretionary? How many other assets do you have? What's your risk tolerance? Your willingness and ability to take risk. What are your other sources of income, if any, from Social Security, rentals, business interests, what have you? There's so many things. Any one of these pieces of the puzzle, you need to make the decision in the context and in concert with the rest of your thing. Just a quick side story. When I first started the business, I was doing true hourly work for those that wanted it. I always wanted to get to ongoing relationships, but I was doing true hourly engagements where like, oh, whatever you need, let me know. I'll sketch out some hours and we'll do it. One of the more common questions was, when should I take Social Security? And to your point, Bill, like on the surface, people are like, I don't know, it seems simple. Like, do I take it at 62 or 70 or whatever? It just can't be done. After doing 2 hourly engagements like that, I realized quickly, and I already sort of knew it, but I realized it definitively, you can't speak to just Social Security. This requires taking full stock of everything in your life and making projections and this and that and all these different levers. So yeah, this is not a decision to make in isolation.
Yeah, the advantages of, say, rental income, small business income, annuity, pension is, and then you have to look at your portfolio here too, because you take your expenses, the basic principle are take your monthly or annual expenses and then subtract your rental income, your pension income, and say even an annuity income for that matter. And at that point, you know what work your portfolio has to do and will dictate, say, a withdrawal rate where you don't maybe need as much, or if you have a lot, the withdrawal rate is lower. In order to understand what your self-directed portfolio, IRA, 401k work has to do, you have to know your expenses and you have to know your fixed incomes and subtract those first, right?
Correct, yeah. That's how it all starts, so which is why I hate rules of thumb that say you need $2 million when you retire. Like, no. Like you said, let's assume your expenses are $100,000 a year to keep the math easy. You're going to have $60,000 of Social Security and pension. It's only $40,000 you need to come from your investable assets. If you only have $100,000 saved, like you're in trouble. If you have $4 million saved, you're fine. That's a 1% withdrawal rate of your $4 million bucks. Flip the script. Go back to the person I was talking about. $14,000 a month in pension, no Social Security. That's $170,000 a year, roughly, of gross income before taxes. Well, let's assume he's only spending $100,000 a year. He doesn't need any investable assets, arguably, right? Because his pension's already more income than he needs every month. So, like, rules of thumb go out the door. You need to do this analysis, like you just said, Bill.
And that's why on the front end, when I was introducing the show, I definitely wanted to mention how powerful a pension can be, that fixed income, because it was a wake-up call for me. So I have a question for you, Andy, in regards to if you have a smaller pension or just a partial one that got frozen or something like that, does anything change with your pros and cons? For instance, my small little pension only covers about 20% of my expenses, but like your friend that's getting $14,000, that covers 120% of his expenses.
Yeah. Like everything, it depends. If it's small enough, it practically doesn't matter. It comes down to just what's the client's preference for whatever their reasons are. Like I do have a client, I don't remember the amount. It's under $100 a month. I want to say like $89 a month pension. And he asked, should we take the lump sum or do the pension? I'm like, and they're plenty well funded with investable assets and Social Security and stuff. And I said in a more professional way, like, it doesn't matter. Like, just whatever you want to do is fine. $98 a month isn't going to make or break you regardless. It's a rounding error. The lump sum, I'm making this up, let's say it was $10,000. I don't even know. It really doesn't matter. When it starts to matter, when it's thousands of dollars a month, when it's $500 a month, like that's more than just a lunch here or there. Like that's some decent money. In your case, Jackie, then this analysis really means more. But otherwise, if it's really small, it's like, yeah, just do what you want to do.
Yeah, the interesting thing to me, and the thing that's important to me with if I had one of these, I'm going to talk about a mistake here because that's also an important learning point. I had access to a pension. I didn't really pay attention to it. I was a hospital employee, and this is in the days when hospitals did this. They don't anymore because they don't want the risk of these pensions for a high value, high salaried employee. There was a vesting period, and I think it was a cliff like investing period, not a gradual percentage investing period. And it was at 5 years. So really make you stay. It was for retention for them, so that if you really wanted full value pension, you need to be there 5 years. And if you left before that, you got nothing. And I didn't pay attention to that. And guess what? They realized the issue there, and they sold the contract to a private contract holder, or say venture capital, in order to get out of basically paying pensions to any employee, any physician employee in our group under 5 years. And it was very bottom line beneficial to them. And they did pull the carpet out from underneath us. And I didn't pay attention when taking the job. That was a potentially significant portion of the retirement benefit I would have there. And if I was planning on working there any less, I needed to save aggressively for myself, because I wasn't going to get anything from them. So there are a lot of mistakes you can make on the front end of this. There are a lot of mistakes you can make on the back end. It should be seen in the context of your entire financial life arc and portfolio, because it's an element of it, and not just in isolation, because it's a diversified asset and it functions in many ways like a bond. It's a nominal bond, not a TIPS like Social Security is. And Jackie, are there things we've missed here? Andy, are there things we've missed here?
Yeah, let's let Andy have it. What else have we missed? We were looking at the pros and cons. I think we got most of them, but what other pro or con or consideration should we consider? And then I will be happy to kind of show a snapshot of my pension, just so people can put all this together and have it make sense.
Yeah, I think pros and cons we hit on. There's a little framework I came up with, and this isn't exact science, but I think it helps people start to think about, should they consider, if they have a pension, should they consider taking lump sum or taking the traditional payments. And I came up with 4 questions. Again, not super scientific, but the more yeses you have as answers to these, the more you should consider taking the monthly payments. One is, do I want or need additional guaranteed lifetime income? Now, want and needs are different things, but like we said before, if you have $100,000 a year of expenses and your Social Security is only, let's say, $40,000, you still have 60 grand of expenses to cover. Now, granted, not all of that's going to be necessary, but still, like, do you want to get a larger base, a larger floor of guaranteed income to help further cover your necessary expenses? If so, taking the monthly payments could make sense. Question 2, am I risk averse? Do you not like risk? Do you lose sleep over seeing account values fluctuate in your investable accounts type thing? If yes, taking the payments might make sense. Question 3, am I okay potentially leaving less to my heirs? Now, again, Jackie, your example where your daughter could have been named as a beneficiary is kind of unique and special. But generally speaking, once you die and or your spouse dies, like, there's nothing left if you take the monthly payments, meaning there's nothing to go to your kids at that point from there, right? Now, granted, you may have larger investable assets you didn't tap as a result. But point is, generally speaking, if you're okay not trying to maximize longevity value or legacy value for kids or whatever, then maybe taking monthly payments makes sense. And finally, do I have above average longevity? Are you expecting to beat the odds, if you will, the actuarial odds that say on average you're going to die 85-ish, give or take? If you have good reason to think you may live till 95 or 100, maybe it's worth considering taking the payments because you win that bet in that sense.
That's a great framework, Jackie. That's a great place to probably close this show, because we have the pros and cons. We have the complexity and potential need for advice, the DIY calculators. But in the end, those 4 questions are probably where we should have started. And we should circle back to that. And because those are the key points. It's looking at risk benefit, need, want, legacy versus longevity. And for me, if I had one, I would be very focused on legacy. For example, if I could take the payments, and then if I didn't need them, I could dollar cost average into the market and take the return. Or I could take the lump sum and even dollar cost average that in over a short period of time to take the long-term return, because say I don't need to spend it. Jackie has even come up with, I'm going to take Social Security at 62 because I have enough money outside of that I'm going to invest it for legacy terms, because Social Security leaves no legacy. And you can make an argument, which you don't hear very often with regards to Social Security, that, you know what? Yes, it's a guaranteed inflation adjusted income that reduces the work of my portfolio. But if I'm already underspending and have a lower safe withdrawal rate on a big enough portfolio, then maybe it really is beneficial from a legacy standpoint for generational wealth generation to just invest it and take the 8, 9, 10% real return. So there are lots of considerations and hacks and nuances, and pensions are just one of them. This has been awesome.
Yeah, we'll put those in the show notes somehow. But I also wanted to make sure for anyone that might have an old pension or a pension they forgot about or anything, where would they need to go? While you're telling them that, I'm just going to show them a quick look of what my pension elections look like. So if anybody wants to hop over to YouTube, they could take a look at it, and it might give you a little bit of value, because I feel like this stuff, it just helps when you have some visuals. So is it the pension benefit guarantee?
I actually just Googled this as you brought that up because I didn't know the answer. I think the PBGC, or Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, can get you there, or at least has a link to it. But according to Google, the Department of Labor, which is the one who oversees ERISA and these retirement income protections, they have a lost and found site. It is lostandfound.dol.gov. I don't know what all information they require you to put in, but it looks like that would be the spot to go to see if you have a lost or missing pension you forgot about.
Is that where they also find the 401k? So is there a clearinghouse for that?
Yeah, it should be. If it's an ERISA plan, again, a private 401k, yeah. If it's public, again, federal or state and local, then I don't think this covers it, to my knowledge.
Yeah, we mentioned that when we talked about 401k. So we'll include both of them in there, because that's your money. And when we're really young, like as young as your son is, 20 years later, you might have forgotten about it. Or at the time, Andy, pensions weren't necessarily portable. So you might have been required to keep whatever you've accumulated there, especially if you were vested. Some of them may not have even had a vesting, but that could be your money out there. And we are around here to try to put a little bit of extra money in your pocket. And that could be a benefit of a late starter, is that you've been around long enough and worked enough jobs where they could be some left behind, either pension or other retirement money.
This is potentially another area where AI could really help.
Oh, for sure.
If you had the right query for whatever information that these sites that look for your money might need, whether it's state specific, federal specific, or private, I could see how somebody could put together with AI a way of saying, this is how you find all that lost money.
So now you're worked up and you're curious about your pension. Typically, there's online access. Is that right, Andy, where they can go online and access their pension account?
Should be. Yeah, it depends on the company and the plan and stuff like that. I've seen some clients where, yes, they have a website they log into, like a Fidelity or whatever, and it has it all there. Others are a little more archaic, and they did need to like call to get a paper statement update estimate sent to them. But generally, you should be accessible online in most cases.
Yeah, hopefully you will have online access. If not, you can do what Andy said, call them up and see how they do it. But this is like mine. I could plug in my information when I wanted to retire, and it would give me all these options. Now, that was like 8 pages, so I don't want to show you that. So I had AI to summarize it.
Wait, Jackie, you used AI? Really?
I use AI way more than you think. I just am very strategic and purposeful on how I apply it. I think that's just the difference. I use it all the time. I mainly like visuals, charts, and a lot of other things. We just use it in very different ways. So yes, I use multiple different programs, but this AI created this, but I had to start myself with the actual options that my company provided me. So we talked about all of these, but just so you can see it together, the single life, like Andy said, that was the biggest payout. The joint and survivor options, the 5, 10, and 20-year certain. Andy, one quick thing, this income leveling, is that something typical that you see as an option where you can get bigger payments on the front end, but when you turn 62, it reduces?
Depends on the plan. I know the federal plan has something like that, where if you retire or start the pension before 62, they give you, in effect, a top up. And the assumption is once you hit 62, you're then eligible to start Social Security. So that top up goes away. Now, even if you don't actually start Social Security at 62, you still lose that top up. So, maybe it's in your interest, maybe it's not to do this.
Right. I was almost thinking about it, against it, but it says before I turn 62, if I turn this on at 55, I would get $1,600 a month. But once I turn 62, I only get $41. But this is just the quick summary of all the different options it showed me. So you are probably able to do something very similar.
Hey, Jackie, there were other options on the bottom half. I found what you did there pretty fascinating. You have indexing in here. Can you talk about that part?
That we did discuss it already, but it was like that 2% adjustment that my offered me. Yeah. But to your point, the terminology sometimes doesn't match up with what you think is. The indexing simply means the cost of living adjustment, and that may not even be the right term, but it's a 2% increase every year, but it doesn't go into effect until I turn 65.
But it's not indexing like it's in the market and you're seeing index returns. So, yeah.
No, but again, to your point, sometimes these terms can be very confusing.
Yeah, read the documents.
Yeah, when I ran my projections, it was like 8 or 10 pages, but it did explain everything. Like with the indexing, it told me this is a 2% increase every year after you turn 65. So I just did this just to make it a little prettier. And again, I did use AI, Bill, to do it. Looked a lot nicer than the thing that my company gave me. So just the last thing I wanted to show is my actual choices, because you'll have this as well.
This is fascinating to me because the complexities involved here seem almost infinite. And
like anything, I guess.
Yeah, and how's the average person supposed to know? You have a dozen different choices. Which one's the best? And logically, they're going to know, like, which one's the most lucrative, right?
I can see how a person who doesn't know anything about this just looks at the numbers and goes, oh, I'll take the big one.
Right, correct. And honestly, I was about to say that, Bill, that I just want to take the big one, and then I stepped away from it. I looked at it again. So again, if you want to hop over to YouTube, I have the visuals, but I'll read through what my final selection was. And Andy, when I was making this choice, I reached out to you and I sent you the long version. You gave me some food for thought or whatever. The main thing was that you pointed out some of the provisions that I had available to me were very generous and not that common. So, your old pension may have some of these options. So I guess don't take anything for granted. So when I turned mine on, I turned it on at 55. And the cash value, if I were to roll it over to an IRA, was $68,000. And so I ended up choosing to turn on my monthly payments. I don't really call it annuities, but I turned on monthly payments at 55 in 2025. Now, again, there was no 10% penalty. That was important to me because I retired early.
It's obvious that's because it's a separation from service. Maybe you have to be not working for them anymore to turn it on. And the rule of 55 seems to be applying there.
No, it's weird, but the rule of 55 has nothing to do with it. I just happen to be 55 because when it comes to a pension, is this right, Andy? You always have to be separated from service. There's no taking a pension while you're still working for the employer. Is that?
I'm going to say, yeah. I mean, I can't say always, but yes, that's typically, yeah, exactly. So yeah, this isn't coincidentally, you were 55 when you did this. That rule of 55 bill is just for defined contribution plans like 401ks. This is actually a substantially equal periodic payment. If hypothetically she could have started the pension at 50, let's say, and did, there'd still be no 10% penalty because it's this substantial equal periodic payment thing.
Oh, okay. So it's like a 72T.
Exactly. It is a 72T. Yeah.
Yeah. And Andy educated me on that because I didn't really make the connection. And for the rule of 55, you have to separate from service that year. I separated from service, and they have record of it and everything. I separated from service when I was 49. So that's why it wouldn't have applied to me. Of course, I would have been happy to take it. So just coincidentally, I turned this on at 55. Now, my payments, again, was $510 a month, and that's all pre-tax. And then I took the 2% per year increase, which is why that indexing bill was the terminology that was a little off to me. So I just 2% increase every single year, but that does not start until age 65. And the formal name to this election that I did is 20-year certain and life annuity with indexing. So that's a mouthful. That's why I saved that to the end. So I just feel like they get very wordy and they can get complex and filled with terminology most people don't understand, jargon and things like that. But I just want to show you in one page, this was my election and this is how my private pension is currently being paid out to me.
So this is what you chose. Interesting to me is in part why you chose it, because I'm aware, I think, that you spend this money. You don't save it for legacy purposes or reinvest it, for example. So what were the whys behind this? Why didn't you delay? Why did you have these choices? What were the advantages, disadvantages, the risks and the benefits, all the things we talked about, the needs and the wants, all those four questions that Andy asked, which I think were pivotal, which may have been the structure you were operating around when you made these choices. What were the things in your life with regards to those 4 questions that Andy asked that led you to make these choices?
Well, I think some of those questions are a little softened for me because, again, this only represents about 20% of my expenses. So it wasn't covering the entire thing for me. So it wasn't, I don't think, as critical for someone where 100% of their pension is what they need for their expenses. But one of the important things for me was that no penalty to turn it on early. And we talked about this a little bit before, Bill. I see my pension a little like the fixed income portion in my overall investable assets bucket. And it's, to me, it's the most powerful pot of money I have at this point because it continues for the rest of my life, even with a 2% increase at 65. So those are kind of the things that went into it for me because it just behaves so differently than any other money that I have. Specifically, most of my money is in stocks or something else. This is fixed. I don't have to worry about the stock market. I don't have to worry about whether the market's down or anything. These payments are going to come to me no matter what for the rest of my life. And I did evaluate the strength of the company. They're actually headquartered in the UK, and that was pretty strong as well, so I felt comfortable with that.
So that's interesting to me. Fundamentally, your choices are an endless 72T plan with a built-in 2% growth rate after 65 that functions in the fixed income or quasi-bond allocation of your portfolio, allowing you to elevate the risk you might take in your other half of your portfolio and or potentially reduce the withdrawal rate that you have from that portion of your portfolio that's working within the stock market. So again, this comes back to our point, I think, that I was talking about with Andy, where you have to see this as one component of a diversified retirement portfolio.
Yeah, that's how I see it anyway, Bill. And you said quasi bonds. It's like, to me, miles better than bonds or anything else because this is guaranteed for the rest of my life.
Once you lock it in, it does not fluctuate with interest rates.
Correct. It's done. It's done, except my 2% increase after 65 every year.
I have learned a ton today. I really have. And I thank both of you because this is one of the selfish areas of doing a podcast. Not something that has ever entered my life where I've had to make these decisions, except for where my son is now involved. So I feel much more literate with regards to talking about investigating these issues for my own family. One thing I will note too is that Jackie did the DIY due diligence and the deep research, but she still trusted and verified it with Andy and did utilize an advisor in making this decision. So it's not mutually exclusive. Being an orthodox DIYer may not be to your best advantage, and Jackie made sure there weren't any blind spots, and everything she did may have been right for her, but she just wanted to make sure there was a second set of eyes on it. So I'd encourage everybody to consider that as an asset in their portfolio, which is how I see an advisor. It's another part of a diversified portfolio is engaging, whether it be periodically, fixed flat fee, hourly, or project based, or continuous for your wealth management and offload that bandwidth. Like you said, Andy, eventually at 70, 80, 90, you may not be able to or want to manage your own money. And I've just been dealing with this with my mother, whose financial advisor up and died. And now we have to reinvent the wheel and find her a new one because she needs the security of that in order to enjoy her life more. So there's a lot of nuances to all this stuff. And I love playing with them because, as we all know, personal finance is personal. Our individual situations are individual. And I thank you both for just honestly educating not only our audience, but me. I appreciate it.
Oh, Mr. Andy, this was a pleasure. I was so glad to bring you back into the podcast. We'll drop a link to your previous appearance, but please share with us everywhere that you're providing all of this free, high quality, high value information to the general public, but also what you do as a one-on-one financial planner.
Few spots. One is retirementplanningeducation.com. That's sort of the hub of my content. From that, you can get to the podcast, which comes out weekly, YouTube channel, Facebook group, although we talked about that. That's now technically hidden, so you need a special invite link if you want to join. Let me know if you do want to join. And there's also a blog on there. My professional business is teninfinancial.com. On that, you can subscribe to the monthly newsletter where first of every month I do a deep dive into some particular topic or topics as it relates to retirement planning. And I am overly active on LinkedIn for anyone who's interested there.
I love it. I'm always looking out for you.
I think you have a LinkedIn social media problem because every time I look on there, you pop up and you posted something like virtually.
That's his thing. Don't stop. I love it.
I've had a lot of people say, I come in for the morning, I check LinkedIn, and everything in my feed is something that Andy has liked or commented on. Oh, sorry about that. But
No, don't. I love those comments as much as anything, and I like the repartee. I'll comment on your comments, and you'll answer them. So that's great.
Keep doing. Your voice is extremely important in this space, so please keep doing
thank you.
it.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the opportunity to be on again, so thank you both.
Yeah, so please hit Andy out. He is, again, a wealth of knowledge.
This is a 2-hour marathon episode, but it's touched not only on pensions, but on flat fee financial advisory, life, and portfolio construction. So I find this sort of be valuable in many different aspects, and I hope that our audience has listened from beginning to end.
Yep, even if you have to break it up, and always remember to our late starters, it is never too late. It's better late than never, and it's always the right time to catch up to FI. So, Bill, as you know, we cannot do this show without our amazing staff and the people that help us put this on. And our editor is Fritz Brizard. We love them, and they keep us going.
Yeah, Jackie, I mean, this show wouldn't have the quality it has without our folks, our peeps. And we'd also like to give you a few calls to action for the show. We love our community, and we hope you love us back. If you would like to support the show and our mission to help late starters, you can do that at Buy Me a Coffee, which is a platform that allows you to make a donation. The link is in the show notes and on the website.
Check out the show notes for resources mentioned in today's show. Also, head on over to our website at catchinguptofi.com and check out our vetted resources, partners, and affiliates for discounts and their services, because we love sharing great deals.
Please share the show with others and head on over to our Facebook community to help us grow. If you prefer video, head on over to YouTube and watch the show there. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Catching Up to FI. We would appreciate it if you could also leave us a 5-star review to help our message reach others.
And while we are financial educators that love to teach, remember that our content is for general education and information purposes only. We are not providing financial, legal, or tax advice. Always do your own research or consult a professional before making important decisions.
So, Jackie, we'll see our audience next time on Catching Up to FI. Cheers.